You won't believe what happened at this graduation ceremony. Stick around to the end of this story, because it's one of those moments that proves you never, ever know the full story of the person standing next to you. If this video touches your heart like it did mine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that restore your faith in humanity. The auditorium was a sea of proud, chattering families, a kaleidoscope of colorful dresses and button-up shirts, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and anticipation. Cameras were held at the ready, a $1,000 lens aimed at a stage where young men and women in blue caps and gowns were about to receive the diplomas that would launch them into the world. Tucked away in the shadow of the bleachers, partially hidden by a large rolling trash bin, was Frank. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore his standard issue, dark blue janitorial uniform, the name, Frank, stitched in fading red thread over his heart. The coarse fabric was a stark contrast to the silks and linens around him, but he didn't care. He was there for one reason only, to watch his son, Liam, graduate. From his discreet vantage point, he had a perfect, albeit distant, view of his boy. His Liam, the young man who had just been accepted into the Naval Academy, a dream born from stories Frank had long since stopped telling. Frank's heart swelled with a pride so fierce it ached. He leaned on his mop handle, his knuckles, calloused and scarred from years of cleaning other people's messes, turning white. He was a ghost in the machine of this prestigious academy, a man who emptied trash cans and buffed floors so his son could walk across this very stage. He had promised Liam he would be there, and he was. Even if it was from the shadows. The ceremony began with the processional. The crowd hushed as faculty and distinguished guests filed onto the stage. Among them, resplendent in his crisp, white Navy dress uniform, chest ablaze with ribbons and medals, was Admiral James Thorne. He was the keynote speaker, a living legend, a man whose very name was synonymous with honor and command. Frank instinctively shrank back further into the shadows. The sight of that uniform, even after all these years, sent a complex jolt through his system, a mix of nostalgia, pride, and a deep, abiding pain. The speeches droned on, but Frank heard none of it. His eyes were fixed on Liam, who sat tall and proud, his own future Navy career just beginning. Frank's mind drifted back to a different time, to the heat and the dust, the sound of rotor blades and distant gunfire. He remembered the men, his brothers, the weight of his own rifle, the weight of command. He remembered the IED, the fire, the screams, and the impossible choices he had to make to save who he could. He remembered the long, lonely flight home, not as a hero, but as a man broken by a war the world was already trying to forget. The VA had been a maze of red tape, his PTSD a monster he couldn't name. The steady, quiet, anonymous work of a janitor had been his sanctuary, his way of providing for his son after Liam's mother had passed. Finally, it was time for the graduates to receive their diplomas. As each name was called, Frank clapped, the sound swallowed by the roaring crowd. When Liam Murphy echoed through the auditorium, Frank's breath hitched. He watched his son stride confidently across the stage, shake the Admiral's hand, and accept his diploma. That was it. That was all he needed. A single, hot tear traced a path through the grime on Frank's cheek. He had done it. He had gotten his boy here. He decided to slip out before the recessional, to avoid the crowds and get back to his duties. As he turned to push his cleaning cart away, the sleeve of his uniform jacket, worn thin at the elbow, caught on the handle of the trash bin. With a soft ripping sound, the entire sleeve tore, pulling up and exposing his forearm and part of his bicep. And there, etched permanently into his skin, was the tattoo. It wasn't a frivolous design, it was a detailed, military-style insignia, a soaring eagle with an anchor in its talons, surrounded by the names of his fallen brothers, the men of his old SEAL team. At that exact moment, Admiral Thorne, who was preparing to leave the stage, happened to glance toward the commotion. His eyes, sharp and accustomed to scanning for details, locked onto Frank's arm. And he froze. Completely and utterly froze. The confident, commanding presence seemed to vanish, replaced by a look of stunned, disbelieving recognition. The Admiral's gaze traveled from the tattoo, up Frank's arm, to his face, seeing past the years of hardship, the graying hair, the weary eyes. The entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath. The principal, confused by the Admiral's sudden stillness, leaned into the microphone. "Admiral Thorne, is everything all right?" But the Admiral didn't hear him. He was already moving, stepping down from the stage, his polished shoes clicking decisively on the polished floor. He walked with purpose, cutting a direct path through the sea of confused graduates, his eyes never leaving Frank. The crowd parted for him, a whisper of confusion rippling through the room. Liam, from his seat, watched in bewildered horror, his face flushing with embarrassment. Was his dad in trouble? Admiral Thorne stopped a few feet from Frank, who stood frozen, his torn sleeve a banner of his humiliation. Frank looked down, unable to meet the Admiral's gaze, bracing for a reprimand, for security to be called. But the reprimand never came. Instead, the Admiral's voice, usually a powerful instrument that could command a fleet, was soft, almost reverent. "Murphy," he whispered, the name carrying the weight of 2 decades. "Senior Chief Michael Finn Murphy." Frank flinched as if struck. A name he hadn't heard in 18 years. A name from a past life. The Admiral's composure broke. His eyes glistened. "I don't know if you remember me, Senior Chief. I was Lieutenant Thorne. I was the green-as-grass junior officer you pulled from that burning Humvee outside Kandahar. You and your team, you saved my life." The silence in the auditorium was now absolute. 1,000 people were witnessing a scene they couldn't possibly have scripted. Frank finally looked up, the memories flooding back. The young, terrified lieutenant, the fire, the smell of burning fuel and metal. He gave a slow, hesitant nod. Admiral Thorne's voice grew stronger, filled with an emotion that resonated through the entire hall. "The Navy told us you were gone. Medically discharged, and then you just vanished. We looked. I looked." He gestured to the tattoo, his hand trembling slightly. "The Vipers. The most decorated, most fearless team in the region. And you were their heart, Senior Chief. You were a legend." He then turned to face the stunned audience, his voice booming now, no longer just for Frank. "Ladies and gentlemen, faculty, graduates, you see this man. This man in the janitor's uniform. This is not just a janitor. This is Senior Chief Michael Murphy, United States Navy SEAL, Silver Star, Navy and Marine Corps Medal, and 2 Purple Hearts. The sacrifices he made, the horrors he endured, they are the very reason we have the freedom to stand here today in safety and celebrate." He turned back to Frank, his voice dropping again, thick with emotion. "The reason I can stand here today." He then did something that would be captured on 100 phone cameras and remembered forever. Admiral James Thorne, a 4-star admiral, snapped to attention and brought his hand up in a razor-sharp, perfect salute to the janitor in the torn uniform. For a long moment, Frank stood there, a statue of a forgotten war. Then, slowly, his own spine straightened. The years of stooped shoulders seemed to fall away. The weary janitor was gone, and in his place stood the senior chief. He returned the salute, his own motion just as sharp, just as proud, a lifetime of discipline and honor flooding back into his posture. The auditorium erupted. The standing ovation was instantaneous, a thunderous wave of sound and respect that shook the very foundations of the building. People were on their feet, cheering, crying, their earlier judgment replaced by awe. Liam pushed his way through the crowd, his face a mask of shock and dawning, immense pride. He reached his father and threw his arms around him, not caring about the uniform or the tears. "Dad," he whispered. All those stories, they were true. Frank held his son, finally allowing the tears to fall freely. "They were true, son." Admiral Thorne waited, then placed a hand on Frank's shoulder. "Senior Chief," he said, his voice firm. "Your seat for this ceremony is not back here. Your seat is next to me, on that stage, as a guest of honor." And so, guided by the Admiral and with his son by his side, Frank Murphy walked out of the shadows. The janitor's cart was left behind as he took his rightful place among the heroes, finally seen not for the uniform he wore, but for the hero he was and always would be. This story is a powerful reminder that heroism doesn't always wear a uniform, and sometimes, the greatest battles are fought long after the war is over. Frank's story didn't end that day. A fund was started by the Admiral and the community that allowed Frank to retire from janitorial work and become a counselor for veterans struggling with PTSD, turning his pain into purpose. If this story of honor, sacrifice, and a long overdue recognition moved you, if it made you believe in second chances and the power of truth, do us a huge favor and like this video. And subscribe to our channel, because we are dedicated to bringing you more stories just like this one, stories that uncover the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. Share this with someone who needs to see it today. Until next time, remember to look deeper. You never know who you might be standing next to.